Nikki, God bless you, woman. How are you?
I'm so good. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm so happy to be having this conversation with you. You run the Scrolling to Death Instagram and the website and the whole bit, right? On all kinds of different platforms. You have been on a crusade over the last several years to educate parents about what social media is, what social media is not, and bring to light some of the most horrific, tragic stories that nobody wants to pay attention to. But I've seen some of your clips where you're just trying to report what happened to young people and
Mhm.
trying to get through the message. And you're just like in tears. And I'm like on my phone, just trying to keep it together. But these are the realities that nobody wants to face about social media. We're exposing our children to these. And you have taken on this task. You fly all over the country. You produce this content, trying to educate people. Talk to me about how you find yourself in this place.
Oh gosh, yeah. And it's these stories that you wouldn't hear really many other places. And when I started learning about these stories, maybe 2020, 2021, by then I had my own social media marketing company for over a decade. And so I was actually managing social media platforms for IT companies
Mm.
and their executives. And so I was deep in on the other side of social media. And at that time, I had taken a big step back from using social media personally, and my kids were getting a little bit older, and I was starting to think about how I was sharing them online and do I want them to be accessible and active on there? And so I started doing that research to see how social media specifically was affecting kids. And I found those stories of kids who you can point back the cause of death to the social media platform, what it served to them, what it allowed to happen, what it did not remove when it should have, the predator that they recommended to the child, the drug dealer that they recommended to the child, all of these things, the choking challenge video that they recommended. And so I felt like parents should know all of the social media harms so that we can make educated choices and what we give our kids access to. And I felt like the best way to do that was to tell the stories from the families who've been affected. And so the majority of the interviews on the podcast are with families who've lost a child or had a child harmed by something that happened on social media. But then I realized we need experts to advise us. So there's also interviews with doctors and lawyers and researchers, and then also lawmakers, because I realized over time, like, this is not fair and we need help. So we need to influence laws to protect kids online. And so it just turned into this whole other advocacy work thing. And it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, wild for sure. I remember. I mean, obviously, you and I are similar ages. We had like I assume you had Facebook as a younger person, and
Mhm.
like we're bumbling through our 20s, like posting photos of like sushi we're eating, like, and
Yeah.
it used to
It
be
was
like
embarrassing.
cat videos and just dumb stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember when I saw a note from a law enforcement agency saying, "Hey, don't post any pictures of your kids if you have the location services turned on your phone." I was
Hmm.
like, the hell is it talking about? It's like, yeah, look, like you can
Hmm.
see this photo and you think the photo is totally innocuous,
Hmm.
but the photo actually has a location. And there are instances where people post photos of their kids, like at the park, and
Yeah.
then predators find out, like, oh, this is where this kid hangs out. And they
Yep.
transport themselves to the park and like prey on the kid.
Totally.
And I think I was probably like 30 at the time. It was over a decade ago. I was like, oh, whoa, that's
Hmm.
crazy. And then when we had our first kid, right around, I was 29, 30.
Hmm.
When we had our first kid, I remember having to start to explain to people like, hey, if I share a photo with you, don't post this online. Like,
Hmm.
I don't want the world seeing this. And so over the last 10 years, again, having kids and seeing all of these things evolve, and especially in the last couple of years, it's like,
Hmm.
oh, we're playing around with this machine that inserts risks into our lives that we were not aware of. But the
Yeah.
predators and the criminals that utilize it are very aware of
Hmm.
all of the nuances. They're
Hmm.
very aware of the scams and all of these things.
Yeah.
Um, you have been in hot fights with educational bodies in that you, like almost all of us, have children that have gone to school and have had technology thrust into their hands.
Yeah.
Talk to me about when this started for you and what this journey was with your kids.
Okay. So my kids entered public school in, oh God, this is like a hard math equation. 2020, I guess. Yeah, TK, my daughter, my oldest daughter started TK on the computer, and because we were at home.
Right.
And within a couple of months, she started complaining about eye problems, and we had to get her glasses. And I thought, this isn't right. Like, she shouldn't be on these devices all day. So we ended up putting her back in a preschool that was in person and did not have technology. But fast forward, now she's in third grade. And I always had concerns about how much screen time they were getting in the public school system. And I would bring up those concerns. I would send research to the principal and their teachers. And the teachers were always pretty good about communicating with me and kind of understanding their and explaining that they're limiting it as much as possible. But I think it was when my daughter started third grade in a GATE class and they made it clear that there was going to be more screen time. That I became a little more vocal about what does that look like? What apps are they accessing? And I think my fight started with YouTube because I know how much bad content through the stories that I've shared is being pushed to kids on YouTube. So I spent about a year trying to get YouTube removed from the school iPads, at least for grades 4 and under, and it was impossible. I spoke at school board meetings and sent lots of research and long emails to the superintendent and all these things. And fast forward about a year, I got a call from a friend and
could I say something real fast? I'm sorry to interrupt.
No.
Speaking of YouTube, there's a group in Boise, out of the Boise school district, that has been on this fight as well, because one of the woman's daughters actually got recommended a video that the girl started playing without the girl doing anything on YouTube of a cow urinating in a woman's mouth. And it was like appalling. This girl came home, flipped out and freaked out. And the parents like, what in the hell? Why were you on YouTube? She's like, we had to. We were supposed to watch this video on YouTube for this homework assignment. So the teachers are sending children to YouTube, and YouTube has no obligation to be careful with what gets recommended. And this group was like, how is this possible? So again, the exact same fight, even at the high school level, it's like, it's impossible to get out.
Yeah, right. And so I didn't have any good leverage, though, of an experience like that until one day in September, I got a call from a friend. His son was playing Geometry Dash Lite, so the free version of a math game in class, and an ad popped up that with a fully naked woman. And it was an ad for a virtual AI girlfriend in the fourth graders class. And so I emailed the principal. I'm so upset about this. And then I want to come in and check my daughter's device and do a spot check. So I go into her third grade classroom, and since YouTube, I looked at a lot of sites, but since YouTube had been on my mind for a year, I went to YouTube and clicked on Shorts, which are those short, like TikTok style videos that get recommended in an algorithm. And I scroll through what's being recommended to my third grader's iPad, and within like 2 minutes, a video comes up. Have you seen the video?
The self-harm one.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a pro self-harm video, and actually shows like a cut with blood dripping down, says hurting yourself is easy. And then it goes into this weird blue spiral that turns into a lake. And I didn't realize what that meant. But once I shared this online, dozens of people were like, that's a pedophilia symbol. So that's indicating that this video is looking for children to prey on. And that's an FBI indicated symbol. And so it gets worse and worse. And
this was off of your child's school administered tech.
Yeah, at school. Right.
At school.
Yeah.
So using the school internet on the school tech.
Yep. Recommended to her. And so from there, I took a video of it because I share this type of thing online. So I got it captured. I sent it right to the board members, the school board members, and the superintendent and the principal, and let them know what was going on. And from there, I was totally gaslit, told that video was potentially a self-help video, told that their filters are super safe, and that, they've flagged that video and that won't happen. They didn't even say that won't happen again. Like, they did the bare minimum. And I believe YouTube is still available now. 6 months later at this school, I have since removed my children and put them in a classical charter school because After finding that video turned into kind of an opt-out fight. I wanted them to just be opt-out entirely of these devices. I didn't feel that they're safe for them at school. And so over a couple of weeks, they investigated and told me that was not possible, that my kids they were required to hand them iPads in the public school system. And if they didn't, my kids would get a substandard education. So,
and I don't mean to put you on the spot. What school district is this?
I'm not going to share the town, but it's in Orange County, California. Yeah.
That your experience is, one, very upsetting, obviously.
Yeah.
And two, just so not unique.
I know.
Like this is the opposite of like, oh my God, I had never heard of this. Like that's not even I can't. It's like, no, you hear it all the time. Like all the time. Anybody who is connected to public school understands this, that these devices do pump really bad, harmful, potentially predatory content to children. And it's almost like people have been desensitized to this.
Yeah.
You know, like what do your board members say? Like if I was a board member and that happened, I'd be aghast. It's like, oh my God, like full stop. However we educated kids in the 90s, that was good enough. Let's get a computer. Like, and nobody's articulating. The funny thing is they always come back to like, well, we need this computer in order to have like a proper education. It's like, how was I educated in the 90s and made it through like calculus? I could code in 3 different languages. Like I could do a bunch of different things that were computer oriented, 3D studio, the whole bit. And I didn't have one-to-one devices administered by school. So like, what is it that we did? So like, what is it that the board members say to you? Because I've had my own fights with board members and arguments and like long discussions with like, I don't understand this. Like what's happening on your end?
I got no word back from any of the board members. The only person that communicated, or my principal, the only person that would communicate with me was the superintendent of IT from the district. And, you know, when you go speak at a school board meeting, I recounted this at a school board meeting. It's not a back and forth then. You say what you're going to say in the 3-minute time limit, the buzzer goes off. They don't ask questions. They don't respond. You then go sit down. And since it wasn't on the agenda that day, it just didn't get addressed. And so, you know, and as I was sharing these things, updates on my opt-out journey and then being forced out of the school, basically, I was sharing it online and I did get so many parents being like, I'm worried about this too, or I found this on their device. And a lot of parents are like, this is just the way it is though. Like, what am I going to do from here? I can't change how things are. And so from there, I realized parents need resources. They need, like, you know, 6 questions to ask your school about school issued tech, or how to request to remove YouTube off the school issued devices, and just easy templates. So I created an organization called Tech Safe Learning, where all of those templates are, and a lot of education and research for parents to try to help us to advocate, because we should have that. We need to stand up for our kids in these situations. They're being harmed by school issued tech, and it's not just inappropriate content. It's lots of things. And we need to stand up for them. They can't stand up for themselves. And the school districts, unfortunately, are strapped in. Like, they're not making changes from their end that I've seen.
And to your point about it's not just pornography.
Yeah.
Right. Like, let's be really, really clear here. And not that pornography is acceptable for like a 4th grader in any way, shape, or form, or acceptable at all. Like, I'm not advocating for pornography, but if like a 25-year-old sees pornography, I'm like, all right, man, like, I'm not that worried about it. But for children especially, it's incredibly distasteful and bad, right? And it's incredibly damaging to their development. Fine. All of that's true. But what's interesting is people think the conversation stops there. There's this leap that people are failing to make, which is no. It doesn't just stop with people seeing inappropriate, like you saw a rated R movie. You know, I saw a rated R movie when I was in elementary school. Like, I'm not saying it's a good idea, but you know, I didn't get hurt.
Scarred for life.
Right. I didn't get hurt by anyone. Children are physically getting hurt off of these devices because the devices grant access to your children. Through the internet. It's inherent in internet connectivity. There's no way that you can make these devices 100% safe. Children are actually getting hurt by predators that are connecting with your children off of school administered tech. It's not just pornography. It's not just inappropriate stuff. It's not just video games that make them addicted. Predators are literally getting children off of school tech.
Yeah. for sure. Also getting cyberbullied. There's like so many millions of accounts of cyberbullying happening through Google Docs accounts. Like the kids find ways to also get to each other, and that includes bullying. And then when you have them bring the devices home, like they can never escape that bullying. It's like constant. But yeah, the predator thing has been really scary. There's been lots of reports of kids being preyed upon through the school issued devices. Some schools use Discord, which is just like a really, an FBI put out a warning against Discord and how many predators are on there. And it's a messaging app kids use when they're gaming, the perfect place for a predator to reach young kids. And then some schools are using it. So yeah, there's a lot of issues. And what is the solution? It's a big one, but I think if you just start with asking the right questions of your school on how your kids are being kept safe on there, and I have a template for that, or if you want to opt out entirely, like I have a whole template with all that research. But so there's steps along the way, but what I've found is once you start asking questions, you're not happy with the answers you're getting, and you don't feel like your kids are safe. So then you end up wanting to opt out or homeschool or leave that school for like a classical charter or something.
You obviously, I assume, aggregate a lot of communications with people where, they share similar stories. There's a big conversation nationally right now about education, and Idaho is no different. Like President Trump recently tweeted out that, he's essentially so excited that Idaho is going to pass a school choice bill and it's awesome and all of these things. Now, look, I'm not interested in getting into the nuances of the bill. Like there are, pros and cons to everything.
Yeah.
But there is a reckoning that I keep telling people is coming because listen, whether you like school choice or you don't like school choice does not matter to me. What matters to me is that we figure out why there is this push back hard against public education. And this is part of it, where somebody said the other day, on one of my posts, they're like, well, if you don't like your board members, like these are your elected representatives, you can vote them out.
Sure.
Yeah, you can. Okay. Yeah. But say I have a first grader and some problem, like say the board member comes in when my kid's in first grade and everything was fine until this board member came in, say that board member inserts a bunch of technology I don't agree with. I write him letters. I go speak in board meetings. I present data. I do all of these things. Even if I'm successful at getting that board member replaced, first off, to do that, I have to find somebody, either myself or someone else, who's willing to attempt to run against them. Then they have to go through the crucible of the public campaign. Then they have to get onto the board. By the way, they have to have my shared values and think the same thing I think. And then they have to have enough support within the board. And usually it's like 5 members, right? At least those are the boards that I've had. They're 5 members. So like this person has to persuade the other 4 members to take a course of action. By the time that I can even get that other person in there, if the community agrees and they vote that person in, my kid is likely in middle school.
It's a multi-year process.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And like the duration of time that our board members have is 4 years. Okay, so let me get this right. If I have a freshman and I have a major problem that I want to address, and like I want to get rid of a board member because they're doing inappropriate things, it's over. Like if I have a freshman, there's no way I'm going to see change while my kid is in high school.
Yeah. And we're kind of in that process with our board where there's some older people on the board that have been on there a long time, and they're still working off of the like equal opportunity thing when it comes to the devices. Like everyone, it was maybe 10, 15 years ago, some people couldn't afford to have internet in their home. So giving their kid a one-to-one device gave them access to the internet to be able to pay bills and do things as a family. And that was something that was a big push for this one-to-one take-home device situation. And I heard that argument still being made by these board members who last year. And so I was able to support a new candidate for a board member, and she won the election and is now on the board. And there's one other younger woman on the board who's involved with preventing sexual exploitation, and she brings in a lot of great policies. So now we have 2, right, that are like younger and kind of like-minded about child protection, but that's not the majority. And so it's going to be like a multi-decade long process to really shift the thinking on a board. So I think it's an important part, but it's not going to solve everything.
Right. Have you found anyone or heard of any district that actually has successfully reined a little bit of the tech back in? I can tell you, in my former school district in Northern California, I have a friend who's on the board, and he got in as right as I was leaving. So I was like, well, I'm out anyway, whatever. Or it was actually a year or so after I left. The point is that he gets on, and he's trying to fight against tech. And he said the only thing that has happened with technology is that for purely budget problems, for purely budget reasons, they had to remove tablets from TK and like pre. Okay.
Just
So
budget.
so literally from like 4 to 6-year-olds, they had to remove these tablets, and just for money. And he said the outcry from the community instantaneously was like this
No.
landslide, because there's a cultural
Why?
assumption that the more tech, the better. Right? They're like, you're removing opportunity from the most vulnerable in our community. And he was
It's
like,
not
dude,
true.
they're
It's
4 years old. Like, what do you think is happening?
yeah.
Like I didn't know anything about Zoom until literally this Saturday we got locked down, because I had 5 classes of SAT kids that all of a sudden I had to meet with online the next day. I had never been on Zoom. I learned it literally in an hour. Okay. And I am
This
not
tech
like,
is so easy.
it's the
Toddlers
easiest
use
thing
these
ever.
iPads. It's just
Right.
insane to say that kids need to be given it at 4 in order to get some job someday. Like this is not accurate, and it's not safe.
No. And look, Idaho is actually working on making a digital literacy program and a curriculum, saying like, okay, we need tech. Okay, we need our kids to understand tech, but which tech? Like, do you want Google Docs? Do you want like Google Meets? Do you want Geometry Dash? Like, okay, Geometry Dash is that. Okay, great. So like we've reduced one program. We can conclusively say if our goal is to have tech literate individuals at 18, they don't need Geometry Dash. Okay, let's keep going down. And they're attempting to say, okay, what should this curriculum look like? And at the end of the day, in order to do, spreadsheets, in order to do word processing, in order to do some base level, I mean, like essentially spreadsheets and word processing are predominantly what people are going to use in the professional world.
Yeah.
And beyond that, you can have electives that teach people, like, for instance, video editing, which I really enjoy.
Yeah.
Things of that nature. But
right.
like, you don't need this broad scale understanding of all of these varied apps and social medias and games and programs to be successful in the professional world. You need a very specific, core skill set. And beyond that, you can add on whatever you need to as you need to.
The negative consequences of giving them that many options is really bad for them. They're spending, I think, is it like 40 minutes? So, like for every 60 minutes that a child spends on a device in class, 38 minutes are spent off task because they have too many options. Like they're not using it in the right way either, because there's too much, and that's bad for their brain. But I want
to. Did you have I'm sorry to interrupt. Did you ever have a TI-84? Like the like pre-calc?
Is that a calculator?
Yeah. Sociographic calculator.
Yes, I'm sure I did, but I wasn't like jonesing for it.
When I was in 1998, I'm in pre-calculus as a junior. Okay. And we had to have the TI-84. You had to have the same thing in like trig, right, the year before. But I remember in pre-calculus, and if they found out you had a video game, there was this like ridiculous video game called like Drug Dealer. It was ridiculous. It was a role-playing game too. So like it was just like a storyboard. There were no graphics because but it had text, and it's like, okay, you get onto the subway and like you get robbed. And essentially like this dumb game that we were playing at 16 was like, it was literally like you'd roll the dice. It's like somebody attacks you and steals your stash. You're like, dang it. Or like you double your money. You're like, yes. If they found out we had that, we got in trouble. Like they didn't want us playing games on our TI-84s. And these were dumb, little like graphing calculators that, Texas Instruments makes for, advanced classes. So the point is, it's like why don't we have the most stripped down, bare bones type of tech that has no bells and whistles, that is not attractive at all, that literally just has these base functions that allow our children to learn a very specific set of technical skills?
Because the tech executives 15 years ago, 20 years ago, saw this opportunity and wanted to get their devices into schools. So they are the ones, Google, Apple, that have the $60 billion a year contracts with the governments to provide their technology that was built for adults and is not locked down. So then they secure those contracts still. And then all of the ed tech companies, they profit off of stealing kids' data and engagement, keeping kids on there as long as possible. That's why gamification engagement is aligned and is a profit center for these companies. So
I have we have a senator, Senator Tammy Nichols, who is a Middleton senator, and I actually did a presentation to her yesterday because Idaho's running a bill, Senate Bill 1070,
Mhm.
that requires that any school district in the state of Idaho, if you're a public school district or a charter school and you distribute internet-based technology,
Mhm.
then you have to meaningfully warn and educate parents about it. You have to
Mhm.
meaningfully warn them, like, hey, this could lead to suicide. It could lead to sex trafficking if these things are not monitored and used appropriately. Like, don't
Yeah.
let your kid take the computer into his bedroom or her
Right.
bedroom.
Yeah.
And it's also an online, then you have to deliver this education in an online platform, because the
Mhm.
bottom line is, if you're like, okay, look, Tuesday, 7:30, we're gonna have like the tech education, you'll have like 40 parents show up out
Yeah.
of 1,000. You'll never get a significant portion of the school district.
Yeah.
And because of that, parents have to go to a website and like watch this stuff. And it's not mandatory. They don't have to do it. The schools just have to provide it. Whether or not the parents are going to do it is up to them. But
Mhm.
the point is that Senator Nichols, in the questions when this was getting presented, she's like, hey, are you like, who collects the data? Like, who's storing this? And what was really beautiful, because we had beat up the program and the system really, really hard, and we knew
Mhm.
people were worried about this, we had made district-wide logins. So the entire district has one login. Parents do not need to register. They don't need to do anything. And
Mm.
all they need to do is put in the login provided by them, and there's no data collection.
Well,
And it
that's
was,
good. Yeah.
yeah, it was one of those things where it's like, yes, I'm an idiot. And even we can design something that doesn't collect data, because the point is not to collect data. The point is to educate parents. And I was so happy when she asked that question, because I was able to say, okay, this is what we've done. And she was like,
Yeah.
got it. Great. Awesome. Like,
Great
that's how you can
question.
have good tech.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, the children's data is there seems to be solutions to kids to be able to, or people to be able to use things online and not have their data collected and sold or exposed to hackers. And that's not, but that's the profit center. That's the engagement model of these companies that offer the ed tech. So an example is, about a month ago, there was a big hack into Power School, which is a huge ed tech company, and they stole the data of 62 million students and teachers, data from as far back as 2008, I believe, all throughout the whole country. And that's social security numbers and all kinds, and location and all kinds of things. And so the data is very insecure, in addition to it being sold for marketing purposes later on and all of those things. So this is something that I'm tackling in a upcoming lawsuit against a couple of the ed tech companies that my children were exposed to in the public school system, in order to try to instigate some changes and some safety around how their data is treated.
There was a gal, I think Senator Zito, in the hearing yesterday, and she had some initial questions, but towards the end, when it was called for a vote, whether it would pass out of the Senate Education Committee onto the Senate floor for a vote, there,
Okay.
they have to make it has to get out of the Senate Ed Committee. And
Yeah.
when they were about to take a vote, she said, "Hey, look, if we're calling these things dangerous tools, and we're saying that they're so dangerous, we have to educate parents about them.
Yeah.
Like, why are we sending these things home with kids?
I
Like, why are
asked
we
you
keeping
that
them
the,
in school?"
the
And I was
last
like,
time we
I
talked.
literally want to get up and be like, testify, like, yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I'm not against tech, but if we, like, first, let's educate people about what they are.
Mhm.
And if it is determined in a broader public conversation that this has very quantifiable value for our children, wonderful. Like, my
Yeah.
TI-84 had value to me in learning pre-calculus. I am all for it. Like, I teach my kids all kinds of tech. Like, I teach them how to do video editing. My 10-year-old and 13-year-old know how to use Final Cut Pro. Like, that's an advanced program. Okay,
Yeah.
great. But we know what it is. We know what it isn't. We also know how to control it. And that question, to me, it's like, yes, this is the party. Like, this is where we are trying to figure out what is appropriate and what is not, because we have inserted this technology into the world and we are sharing it with our children. And not a lot of people understand the consequences for that.
Yeah. And I just don't see another option right now other than restricting it entirely up until a certain age, because there's no like you said, there's no way to lock it down. There's no way to make it safe. And there's also so many arguments against it being actually educational. The worldwide education scores have plummeted in areas where children are using tech to learn. And so, after this call, I'm going to an event with it's for superintendents in this area's school districts. And it's with Jonathan Haidt, and his team got me a seat. Like, I'm not a superintendent, but
yes, look at you.
But he's very aligned on. So his book, Anxious Generation, I'm sure everyone's heard of it.
Yeah.
But he's starting to talk about ed tech, and he's starting to recommend that we should not be introducing it at all until after middle school, until high school, because he's very stuck on these.
Jonathan Haidt, snap. Yes.
So these middle school ages are so susceptible to all these harms, more than the younger kids, and even more than the high schoolers, because the high schoolers have a little bit more maturity on them. I mean, they're still making mistakes and all of that. But if we can get kids through their middle school years without access to these online harms, they're in such a better place. And so, yeah, I don't see a solution. You can try to implement safeguards, but it just has not been successful. So I'm good with an opt-out mentality for now.
Yes, and listen, I deeply feel that, and I think the only way that tech is delivered in my household personally is if it's a closed loop. So I really like old school games, right? Like Pong and stuff. Like Tetris was lit. Can we just go back? So, and the new free game platforms off that whole ecosystem of like, just download, Geometry Dash Lite. And by the way, we're going to feed your kids all kinds of ads, because that's the monetization model. It's like, isn't there something where I can just pay up front and just have that thing? So I got my kids this old school Atari recently that has like 2 joysticks, and they're like playing Joust and stuff. And it's fantastic. So you have that tech, which is a completely closed loop. There's no entrance or exit. It has like lunar landing and stuff, and they play it. And by the way, they get bored because it's not that it's not that crackhead kind of game where you get into, you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So there's that. Or when my 7th grader does have to do things off of his school administered tech, my 2 younger kids, I pulled out and put into a classic charter school, probably similar to yours. They don't have tech integrated, but my 7th grader has been managing it fine. The only time he gets to get on his school administered Chromebook is when he's sitting at the kitchen table with his back to me. So I can always see the screen and know exactly what he's on. And every time he goes for that Chromebook, I say, hey, bud, what are you doing? He says, schoolwork. What schoolwork? I got to do X. Why do you need this to do X? Is the assignment on the Chromebook? Right? Like, what is it that how are you trying to interact? And yes, perhaps a laborious, tedious thing that some people are like, I don't have the time for that. That's fine. Not everybody does, but that's the only way I know how to feel comfortable with my son going onto an internet connected device that I know he showed me he can blow past through GoGuardian in 15 seconds. He can look at anything on YouTube. He can look at anything. I mean, the worst websites, like, he can do all of these things. And if I'm going to have that in my house, it has to be something where I physically see what he's doing at all times.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many problems. Like the fact that how easy it is for him to get past the parental or the controls, right? And get access to super inappropriate things and predators and all of that. For me, it's like, no, I'm not going to let them use that then, because I can't I don't know. I don't have middle schoolers yet. So there's middle school time where you're like, okay, a lot of that schooling is integrated on the technology, and I don't know where we'll be by the time my kids are in middle school. But I did
let me be clear. I'm not defending the tech integration.
I know. The
charter school that my 2 younger kids go to didn't have his grade yet.
Right.
So literally, if they had, we would have asked to get him integrated as well. He's doing all right. So we haven't spent the Herculean capital to like put him in private school.
Yeah.
I am not. This is the weakest link in this entire public education system.
But imagine you are taking on a tech together mentality. You are monitoring it as he's using it, and then it goes away. But think about the thousands of other kids in that district, or hundreds that their parents don't know, and they're also not watching because they trust the school. So now you have hundreds of other kids or thousands of other kids accessing all of these things. Like, that's where my mind just blows up, because I'm like, it's not just my kid, it's all the kids. And that's where I'm at the school board meetings being like, why aren't we looking out for kids? Why are we giving them access to these things? Look how easy it is to circumvent the
Right.
whatever controls you've added.
Right. Why aren't we looking out for kids? I actually, in the presentation to the Senate Ed Committee, I even articulated, look, we do have monitoring devices in the state of Idaho,
Right.
but that betrays the reality that these are not safe. People believe that there's a monitoring device and the monitoring device is 100% secure. Schools know it's not 100% secure. They're not bad people, but they know it's not 100% secure. And they're not making more work for themselves by saying, hey guys, this isn't 100% secure. There's no obligation under Idaho code right now to inform parents that school devices are not 100% safe. We're trying to fix that, but this is at the heart of it, which is people assume that because the school district is handing this technology to my second grader, my third grader, my kindergartner, it must be safe, appropriate, and valuable.
Yeah.
That is a false assumption. There is no obligation for them to prove efficacy or value or safety. There's just not. And they try, like, let me be clear here. The school districts I've talked to, they are all trying every day to make these pieces of tech better. They are smart people. They have teams of people. They admit they can't do it. I have not spoken with a single school district like, dude, we got it licked. Every time they're like, all right, this is our team. This is like the 3 or 4 of us. And like, these are the problems we've been working on. Yeah, man, every other day there's another thing that pops up. They acknowledge they can't do it.
They can't do it. They can't keep kids safe, yet we're still giving kids access to unsafe tech. That's what I don't understand. And I agree that we should be educating parents on the fact that they are unsafe since they do have them in hand. But this is a bigger problem that we need to tackle, right? And that's something I'm kind of trying to work on a federal level, is federal bills to protect kids on these devices and just general awareness that they're unsafe. Because I think what will happen when your bill passes is that parents will be educated and they will say, like that senator said, it's not safe. No, I don't want them to have it. I would like to opt them out. And then when you have a bunch of parents trying to opt out or leaving the school, which a lot of parents are doing at our school, they've had to combo up class grades because there's not enough students anymore to fill the grades. And so
that's in the school that you guys left?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because there's one school in the district that the principal is more anti-heavy tech. And so parents who are concerned are moving over to that school or to a classical charter school or homeschooling. Private schools nearby are still really heavy on tech, but there are some options further away. And so there is a movement here, at least, to remove kids from the situation because we can see that the school is failing in protecting them.
There's one superintendent I spoke with recently. We were having a conversation about the duration of tech. And one thing that he was like, listen, how long was your kid on tech per day at school? And I thought it was a really good question on his part, because I was like, I don't actually know. Like, I've watched him watching TV, right?
Yeah.
Like, my wife would go volunteer for things. We both volunteer pretty aggressively. And she was like, she would go, not aggressively. That sounds weird. We volunteer frequently.
Regularly.
Yeah. Right. There it is. I don't know why I said it. I'm like, get the math problem right. It's not like that. But we would volunteer regularly. And my wife would watch my first grader or second grader finish the program, or like the art thing, whatever she was volunteering for, and then just go straight to a school administered Chromebook, sitting in his class, open it up, put on headphones, and watch Odd Squad on PBS Kid in class. And she's like, he does it every time. He'll finish really quickly and he'll just go over and watch TV or scroll the internet looking for alien heads. And so that's terrible. Yeah. But I don't have hard data on how long he's on it per day. And so this superintendent was like, hey, in the next 6 months, we are committed to getting some kind of like screen time monitor.
It's so easy to do. I mean, I know it's a lot of devices. It's not easy, but the Apple iPads have screen time tools built in already. They're probably disengaged because they don't want parents to know. But that's a fight to have. That's a question to ask. I want the screen time setting turned on. And here's why. Here's all the research about screen time and how it's bad for kids in excessive amounts. So that's a question and a request parents can make. I'm sure Google Chromebooks, the same thing.
They got to have something. It's Google, man. Like, you can't tell me how long this screen was turned on in a 24-hour period. I want the best possible education options across the board
Mhm.
for this country's children.
Yeah.
And that means we need to have great public schools. We need to have great private schools. We need to have great charter schools. We need to have great homeschools. We need to
Mhm.
have all kinds of things that provide the best possible education. And if there is and to that end, there has to be a meeting of the minds with this growing public movement that says, hey, we feel you have gone public school. We feel you have gone too far
Mhm.
with tech. We want to keep our kids in public school. I can't homeschool. I can't
Totally.
afford private school.
Yeah.
My oldest kid doesn't have a charter school that has room for him right now. Like these are our schools, and
Mhm.
we are asking you to prioritize us right now. And we're asking you to either convince us that this technology is
Mhm.
producing educational outcomes that
Mhm.
are valuable and worth the risk, or we convince you, or we all
Mhm.
come together and say, okay, you cannot provide educational
Yeah.
outcomes that justify this risk. Perhaps we tailor it back.
Yeah.
That's what we do with everything. We have a risk cost benefit analysis. Like
Yeah.
that's what we need to do here.
And they can't cite studies that were funded by the ed tech companies because those are the only ones that show a benefit to using ed tech over pencil and paper.
Yeah, man.
We'll get there, I
Yeah.
think. I hope. I mean, it's very different than the social media harms fight that I've been having separately, but yeah,
But
this is
it's all the same thing.
Mhm.
I feel as a country have found ourselves with this hammer in our hands. And we're
Mhm.
like, okay, we're just gonna hit every single nail here. Like
Yeah.
all of these are nails. Like that's not a nail, that's a marshmallow. Like you hit the wrong thing, right? Like,
Mhm.
so let me do this. Let me ask you, because again, I don't want to take too much of your time today. Do we have reasons to be optimistic nationally
Regarding educational technology, social
regarding
media.
tech and children?
Yeah, yes, I think that there was great strides last year with the U.S. Surgeon General's advisories and warnings. Also, the movement behind Jonathan Haidt's work. Hate, I always say hate. Jonathan Haidt's work.
Tell him Boise wants him to come back. I just interviewed a
Oh,
senator
good.
yesterday
Okay.
who had gone and heard him speak, and this
Mhm.
senator has a bill going through to require that all school districts get a cell phone policy in place to like
Good. Yeah.
stop the distractions. So like
Yeah.
he's a believer, and I want Jonathan Haidt to come back. I want to shake the man's hand. Tell
Yeah.
him Boise likes him.
Okay, good. Yeah. I'm going to be interviewing him probably next month about ed tech. So this will be an ongoing conversation. But I think generally there's been a lot of movement and increase in awareness across the whole family regarding the harms of anything online. I think that there is also, interestingly, the young people who grew up with tech and are now in their 20s, they are overwhelmingly saying that they will not give their kids technology or social media access or any of that crap until they're an adult. Like they're literally the most conservative about it. So I think this whole thing will course correct as these people start to have children, the people that have felt the harms themselves. But we still have this gap of 10 years or so with
Right.
people who have kids now. So I think awareness is increasing. There was great strides on legislation last year, although we didn't end up succeeding in getting a really important bill passed, the Kids Online Safety Act. But that's going to be reintroduced by Senators Blackburn and Blumenthal federally this year. And so with that hopefully passing this year, that will add some responsibility onto the tech companies for the harm that they're creating. There's also a bunch of lawsuits from school districts and states and civilians against the social media companies and the ed tech companies that are starting to move forward and break through some legal barriers that will set some precedent for safety as well. So I do think that last year set us up really well, and this year we'll see some changes.
God bless it. Nicki, I really appreciate you. You have been at this for years. I have relied on your content to educate myself. I've passed it off untold numbers of times to people
Thank you.
to help them. You're offering such a wonderful glimpse into a very difficult state of existence that we find ourselves in. But man, somebody's got to do it, and you took up the charge, and I am so grateful for that. Thank you for coming on. I hope we can do this again. And I hope in a couple of weeks I'll have really positive news about Idaho, setting the standard for educating parents.
Yeah, let me know. And if anyone listening has questions specifically about their kids' school issued technology, or confused about something or want to share a story, I want to hear about that. So contact me, and I'm sure you'll include my contact information. But
yeah. And again, you're Scrolling to Death with a number 2 on,
yes.
on Instagram. That's your website as well, right?
Yeah, .com. Mm-hmm.
Great. Scrollingtodeath.com. And then the tech resource website again?
That is techsafelearning.org.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for taking the time today. Thank you for what you're doing for the United States and the world. And again, let's keep after it.
Thanks, Matt. You do a great job at this. I love chatting with you. Thank you so much.
You too.